You're entering another dimension. It is a dimension not only of horror movies, but of horror television. It is a realm of both commentary and review, of opinions and beliefs. We call this realm the Horror Movie Syllabus. Hello, and welcome to the Horror Movie Syllabus. My name is Professor Victor, and I am the host of the syllabus, and I usually go through all of the essential, noteworthy, interesting, and notorious modern horror films, but today we're doing something a little bit different. If you're new to this channel, I recommend you check out our introduction video. There's a link to that in the description below, and it'll tell you what we usually do on the Horror Movie Syllabus, but that's not what we're doing today. Today, we're not talking about horror movies at all. We're talking about horror television. And the reason for this is pretty simple. I like television. I talk about television quite a bit in these videos. And I felt, why not just talk about my favorite horror television? Because frankly, there's a lot of really good horror out there right now. For those of you that don't watch a lot of TV, you may not realize that we're in a new golden age of television right now. There's a lot of quality TV out there. Gone are the days where A-list actors and directors and writers would not work on television because it seemed like a lesser medium. Gone are the days where sequential storytelling and complex storylines and high production values don't make their way to TV because there's just not enough money or interest in it. All of that's gone. With prestige television, with cable networks fighting over eyeballs, and with the, frankly, with the movie theater model changing and becoming more of a streaming model, there's never been a better time for quality television in general, and horror television in particular. The fact is, there's a lot of quality horror television out there, and I like it very much. I like the long-form storytelling nature of television, episodic television. I like getting to know characters and watching them evolve and change and go through arcs. And those are things that you can't always accomplish in a movie. So I'm a big fan of television, in particular horror television. So I figured, why not go ahead and make a list of what my favorites are, because it's YouTube and people love lists where you rank things. Apparently that's a big thing. So why not try that? In reality, I didn't want to put television as a category on a horror movie syllabus because it's called Horror Movie Syllabus. I originally had this as a subgenre, but it's not really a subgenre. It's something a little different. So I figured I'd give it its own video, give it a chance to breathe, so I could talk about it at length, and share with you what I love about horror television. Now, this list is a ranking of I'll call it a top 10 in order. It's Professor Victor's top 10 favorite horror television shows, and I understand from watching other lists on YouTube that you're supposed to let everybody know, remind them that this is just, this is your opinion. It's just your opinion, and it's not dispositive and doesn't mean that their opinion doesn't matter, and all that. And all that's true here. But this is the Horror Movie Syllabus, and I'm Professor Victor of the Horror Movie Syllabus. So this is a dispositive list. This is the 10 best horror television shows. That's it. No argument. These are the 10. And sorry if you don't like it. Anyways, let's go ahead and just get into these 10 shows and talk about them just a little bit. The first show I'm going to bring up it's American Horror Story. And American Horror Story it's an anthology horror series by a guy named Ryan Murphy, who's done a lot of quality television. He did the show Glee. He's also done American Crime Story. He's done quite a few things. Side note, by the way, he actually, my mother actually hit his car in a parking lot. He was very kind to her about it. It was a total accident, and he was very nice about it. So, a lovely man in real life, apparently. But very talented producer, showrunner. And American Horror Story is a great show because, like I said, it's an anthology series. So it's been going on for like 9 seasons now, or 10 seasons. And each season is a different story with a different theme. The first one being haunted house theme, the second one being an asylum theme, the theme for witches, and so on. And this works really well for me. I like anthologies quite a bit, and it keeps the show from getting stagnant and stale. It keeps it fresh. Every season there's something new. However, he tends to use a lot of the same actors from season to season, although they play different roles usually. And I think that's kind of fun because if you get attached to a certain actor, certain character, certain person in the show, you like them. Well, you'll see them going on in further seasons as maybe different characters. So you don't have a jarring loss of the talent year in and year in and year out as the show goes on. So I like that quite a bit. Now the shows vary in quality from season to season. Some seasons are better than others. People have their favorites. I'm no different. I think Coven's the best. If you're following the show, if you know the show, I like Coven quite a bit. A Freak Show is also quite good. Hotel, not as great to me. Asylum was a bit of a mess. But you get the idea. There's something for everybody. You know, you may not like one season, but you'll like another season. And I think the talent across the board has been quite good in the shows. I think that the people that are in the shows have been delivering the goods. They're really, really good. And the storylines, maybe not the most original in the world, but there's usually an original take on them. There's usually a pretty good twist on it or good interpretation of it. So that's also kind of fun. I just like the show. It's got its fans. It may be getting a little bit long in the tooth now. I think they might wind up wrapping it up soon. But so far I've enjoyed it. And again, it stays fresh because they change the theme every season. It's a lot of fun. If you haven't checked it out, I would definitely check out at least the first season, which is quite strong. I think it's called Murder House, and maybe Coven. You can jump around if you wanted to, but it's definitely one that's worth your time. By the way, for those of you who watch the channel regularly, you'll be noticing this is a different setup because it's for horror television. For those of you who are younger, this is a television, believe it or not. And for those of you who are older, no, I don't generally watch a lot on this television. This is not my main television. This is mostly here for partly nostalgic reasons and partly because certain video games and other things that hook up to older TVs work on this and they don't necessarily work on a flat screen. So there's that. Funnily enough, my ring light actually makes it look like The Ring, like I'm going to watch the video and die in 7 days right now. So that's kind of fun. But anyway, so I just figured I'd give you guys a different angle, doing something a little different today. I want to have a little bit of a different perspective for the video as well. Number 9 on my list of horror television shows is Supernatural. Now, Supernatural is a show about two brothers who are hunters. Basically, they hunt monsters, and it's part of their family business, if you will. And the show kind of operates a little bit as a Monster of the Week kind of show where they capture a different monster every week or kill a different monster every week. And as the show goes on, they've built out certain mythologies, certain big bad monsters to chase. And the show really hit its stride, probably, I think it's third season, where they really started folding mythology and religion into the show. And once they did that, the show for me really took off. I found it to be an enjoyable enough diversion. But when they started getting into theology, heaven and hell, and angels and devils, and things like that, it got really good. That's kind of a sweet spot for me. I mean, you might remember me talking about in my religion subgenre video how much I tend to like that subgenre because I like that kind of topic. So this show, when it starts dealing with that, it really gets good for me. Now the show went for 15 seasons, and it's arguably several seasons too long. It probably ran out of steam a little bit. But the key is that its two leads, Jensen Ackles and Jared Padalecki, have a lot of charm playing the two brothers. And if you love them, then you'll enjoy the show, even though it maybe overstayed its welcome a little bit, got a little bit stale, because their chemistry is great. And it really is what the show hinges on. The show's got a lot of female fans because they are attractive men. But it's really that camaraderie, those two brothers, and their relationship and the way they play off of each other that carries the show, and was able to get 15 full seasons out of it. Because without them holding that show down, it would have lost steam a lot earlier. And you might argue that it did from a thematic or storytelling narrative standpoint. But honestly, I just enjoyed every week tuning into seeing these two guys go on an adventure and their banter and how much fun they were having and stuff. So it was fun enough, even though like it probably should have wrapped up maybe in half the time it actually did. I still really enjoyed it up until the end, and I thought it ended very strongly. So Supernatural is one. It's got a legion of fans. It's a very, very popular show. In fact, I think they're talking about doing a spin-off now, which I'm not sure it really needs a spin-off, but really, really great show. I really enjoy it. The rewatchability is high, and if you haven't checked it out, give it a shot. Number 8 on our list is The Walking Dead. The Walking Dead's a tough one. I almost didn't include this on the list at all, and the reason why is because it has definitely overstayed its welcome. Uh, the show is the show was great when it first started. The first few seasons of that show were phenomenal, and then it's gone on far too long. For those of you not familiar with it, the show is basically the zombie apocalypse. It follows a group of survivors who are trying to survive the zombie apocalypse by sticking together, and it really focuses more on the interpersonal relationships amongst that group, and not so much on the zombies themselves, and like many good zombie stories actually do. Now, the show is based on a comic book of the same name. That is it was an indie comic book that became super popular in part because of the show, and it's a great comic. And the show follows it somewhat authentically or accurately. There's a few major changes, but for the most part, the plot is the same, and the themes are the same, and everything works out pretty much the same. And that's cool because I like the comic book, so I like that it's true to the comic book. I think the acting across the board is really great in the show. The problem is, like I said, it ran a little too long. Like at some point, you had to start wondering, like, who's mowing the lawns there? Because the grass is staying short, and it's been years now. Who's mowing those lawns? Somebody came up with that. I thought it was funny, but um, the show ran as team, like main characters leaving the show, actors leaving the show, being replaced by characters that were less interesting, kind of the same plot points or same plot tropes getting repeated over and over again. They started getting to a problem where like they'd have a really great season opener and a really great season finale, and everything in between was pretty dull. They started doing some cheats where they do some cop out things where they put a character in peril, make you think they were dead, only to not have them be dead. Comic booky type stuff that really was kind of disappointing, and I think a lot of fans started jumping off the ship at that point, and the show really lost a lot. It spent a lot of its goodwill. For me too. I haven't even seen the last 2 seasons, and so that's why I wasn't going to put it on the list. But the fact of the matter is, the beginning of the show was so good, and it shocks me that a show like this ever got on the air. And it's not even a cable channel. It's AMC, which is a basic cable channel. How a show this gory and intense got on the air blows my mind. And it, again, reinforces that we're living in a golden age of television, because the fact that we can get shows like The Walking Dead is mind-blowing to me. The quality of that show, especially the early seasons, the gore in it, the taboo subject matter, shocking that we got this show. And so I felt like I had to leave it on the list because it's noteworthy that it even exists at all, even though, like I said, it's past its prime. It's got a spinoff that's not for me, I guess. But the fact that it exists, I had to leave it on the list. Number 7 on my list of the undisputed best horror television is The Haunting of Hill House. The Haunting of Hill House is a Netflix show. It's a relatively new show. Came out just, like 2 years ago? And it's absolutely fantastic. It's by our good friend Mike Flanagan, who everything he touches turns to horror gold, and this show is no exception. I didn't have high expectations going into the show, which is a little bit weird because this is a subject matter that's right up my alley. The haunted house, ghosts, and everything is really kind of in my sweet spot. And some of you on the comments, we've talked about this a little bit. And for whatever reason, I just wasn't super hyped to see this one. I guess I didn't have high expectations because it's a Netflix show, and I didn't really think they would do anything particularly fresh or original. I was wrong, because Mike Flanagan balances a traditional ghost story, and this is like traditional material. It's Haunting of Hill House. It's an adaptation that we've talked about before, and we'll probably talk about again. But it feels fresh in part because he's got great characterization, and in part because of incredibly good filmmaking. There's a whole episode that's filmed to shoot like I think it has like 7 cuts in it or something like that. It's some really impressive filmmaking, which is no surprise because again, Mike Flanagan, an impressive filmmaker. The characters are great. The story works really well. The scares are good. They're solid. The effects are great. This is just a really well made show. Like American Horror Story, it's an anthology. There's a second season, Haunting of Bly Manor, which is a different cast and a different story, but similar tone, same filmmaker. So, and by the way, that's also really good. I think there's no plans to make a third season right now, which is kind of a bummer because first two seasons have been very, very good. The first season in particular, fantastic. Like I said, I went in with lowered expectations and I was very, very pleasantly surprised at how good it is. It's an exceptional show. I really, it was one of those ones where I wound up binge watching it. I usually am not that big a fan of the binge watching these days, but this one, I couldn't stop watching it. I stayed up way too late trying to crank out a few more episodes. It's fantastic. If you haven't checked it out, I definitely would recommend it. It's pretty spooky, but it's not so intense that you couldn't handle it, I'm pretty sure. But it's a fantastic ride. It operates really well as a family drama, too. The drama in this show works really, really well. It's a big part of what makes the show work so well. The balance between the horror and the drama is on point. Mike Flanagan has done it again. We've talked about him a few times in the syllabus. We'll talk about him again. He always brings an A game, and he did not slack off in this show. I really, really wound up loving Haunting of Hill House, and it forced its way onto this list. Number six on our list is the network version of Hannibal. And Hannibal is the story of Hannibal Lecter from the Silence of the Lambs series of books and movies, and it actually operates as a prequel to that movie. But it's not Anthony Hopkins playing Hannibal Lecter. It's Mads Mikkelsen, and it's Hugh Dancy playing Will Graham, the guy who caught Hannibal Lecter. And this is before Hannibal Lecter's been caught, and it's an incredible show. Now, I was saying with Walking Dead that it's shocking that a show could like Walking Dead could have been made and put on television. Hannibal really exemplifies that way more because Hannibal A was on network television, on NBC, regular television that like anybody could watch, and it's really artsy. It's done by Brian Fuller, who's done a lot of great TV work, including Star Trek and I think Pushing Daisies. He did one of my favorite comedies of all time, a show called Wonderfalls, which is grossly underrated. Hardly anybody knows about it, but it's fantastic. But I digress. This show is so artistic. The imagery, the horror imagery in this, it's gorgeous and intense and crazy and insane and surreal. The show is it's really like a work of art. It really is fantastic. Now, when they announced the show, I thought it was a horrendously bad idea. I feel like they've gone to the Hannibal mine too many times. They've drawn from that well till it's dry. I really didn't think there was anything more to say about Hannibal Lecter, and I was wrong. This show is excellent. Now, the performances, Mads Mikkelsen makes an incredibly great Hannibal Lecter. Now, Anthony Hopkins is Anthony Hopkins. You can't touch him. But he doesn't try to mimic Anthony Hopkins, and that's the key. He makes Hannibal his own character, and that is very, very key to why this works. And Hugh Dancy as Will Graham is a great performance of a very troubled cop who is trying to solve crimes and dealing with, let's face it, mental health issues. But the portrayal of his issues and the way he solves crimes and everything, it's so incredible. And then the way it weaves in the storylines from the books, the movies, is really, really cool. It's unfortunate the show didn't keep going on, but I'm kind of glad in a way that it didn't. So it never got a chance to get bad. The quality never got a chance to drop off. I think 3 seasons, and it's excellent all the way through. And really, just the imagery in this, like, it's hard to believe that it's a TV show. When you watch it, it looks so cinematic and so exquisite. It's shot so well that it's hard to believe that it's a network television show. It's hard to believe they put the money into it to make it look this good. I'm pretty effusive about this one, in part because it shocked me. I really thought it was going to be a terrible idea, and instead it winds up being one of my favorite horror television shows of all time. It's exceptional. Great storytelling, great acting, great production values, all across the board. This is a quality premium good show that's just made at a level that television just shouldn't even be at. Again, golden age of television. The stuff we're getting, the quality of it is so great, and Hannibal is a perfect example of that. Number 5 on my list of horror television is Penny Dreadful. Now, Penny Dreadful, for those of you that don't know, is a Showtime show, or was a Showtime show that is, it's about a group of people that are basically, well, I don't want to give too much of it away, but in order to explain the show, you have to understand that it basically is an interpretation of a bunch of literary horror characters kind of coming together to work together for a common cause. If you ever saw the movie League of Extraordinary Gentlemen, or better yet, read the comic book League of Extraordinary Gentlemen, which is about a bunch of literary characters who come together, kind of almost like a superhero team, this is like the same concept, but for horror. And that was right up my alley. And I am spoiling things a little bit about that because I didn't know that going into the show. And when I found that out, I got really giddy because that is really kind of a sweet spot for me. It's kind of like the Universal Monster era. It's a period piece. And aesthetically, it works really, really well. It's got a fantastic cast led by Eva Green and Josh Hartnett, who are great. Pierce Brosnan. It's really, really exceptional, and the take on the classic monsters and the take on these literary characters is phenomenal. It's very rich storytelling. It's done really, really well. It's a lot of fun. Is it scary? It's maybe not quite as scary as some of the other shows. In fact, most of these shows aren't super duper scary. Really, they have some scary moments, but this one in particular, it's for me, it was more fun than scary. Like there's some, I guess, some scary scenes and stuff like that, but for the most part, I just had a lot of fun seeing all these characters interacting with each other and getting into these adventures and stuff. I also do like the interpersonal dramas that they set up amongst the characters. They tackle some interesting storylines with these dramas, and the actors are more than up to the task. So the quality of this is astoundingly good. Now pay cable, so you kind of expect that a little bit more from something like Showtime, but it really, really wowed me. Like I said, this show is right up my alley. It's my sweet spot, and maybe it's not for everybody. I've ranked it maybe higher than most would, but I really loved this show. I love everything about it. I love all the actors. I love all the characters. I love the set design and the production design and the effects and story. All of it. It all works for me really, really well. And a lot of you might not have seen it. It's only 3 seasons. Again, it ended before it had a chance to get to get stale, which is probably a good thing. But I love the show. I'm a big fan of it. And if you haven't seen it, I would definitely recommend it for you. So, Penny Dreadful, check it out if you haven't. Number 4 on my list of horror television is Bates Motel. Now, Bates Motel is another one of those like Hannibal, where I thought the idea of doing this was horrendous. If you're not familiar with the show, essentially Bates Motel is the story of a young Norman Bates from Psycho before Psycho takes place. It's the story about him and his mother. And it seems like it's a terrible idea. Because it really is actually a terrible idea. Why would you mess with a classic like that? But it's incredible. Now, interestingly enough, they've modernized it, so it takes place in modern times. They didn't. It's not a period piece. It doesn't take place. The original Psycho takes place in 1960, so they didn't make this show in the 1950s. They set it in modern times, and that works out pretty good. So you don't have the distraction of it being a period piece. It works in modern times, so it's the same story just set in modern times, and that works. It works really, really well. The other thing that makes this show work really, really well is the actors. Freddie Highmore plays Norman, and Vera Farmiga, the incredible Vera Farmiga, plays his mother Norma. And they are exceptional in this. They hold this show together so well. There are several other ancillary characters in the show, and every actor is bringing it in the show. Everybody's good in this show, and it works so well. The way they set up mystery in the show is awesome because they expect that you've seen Psycho. You don't have to have seen Psycho to watch the show, but it helps. They expect you to have seen it. And they're going to use that to their advantage in setting up their mysteries. They're going to subvert expectations. I don't want to get into it too much because I don't want to spoil the show for you, because if you like Psycho, you should absolutely see the show. But they don't do everything in the way you think they would do it, and there's plenty of surprises in here, and yet it's still going to go to the inevitable conclusion that if you've seen Psycho, you know what that is. So it's still going in that direction. It doesn't betray anything. It really works extremely well, and it's a fascinating exploration into the mind of Norman Bates. The mental illness that Norman Bates suffers from is explored better here than it has in any of the movies that were made, and they treat it in a way that, again, mental illness never really treated terribly well with horror, but better here than in many other things. You really feel for Norman. You understand that he's sick. And you develop a certain feelings for him. You feel bad for him. You're rooting for him to get better. You know that he will, and that inevitability really works for the show. Astounding that they made this work, and it's 5 seasons, and it tells the story in the perfect arc. They knew exactly where they wanted to get to, and then they stopped when they got there. They didn't try to carry this on too long like other shows do. They didn't try to milk it. They did exactly what they wanted to do. They told the story they wanted to tell, and they told it wonderfully. It's really well paced. It's really well made. And again, if you've seen Psycho, if you like Psycho, you might think you don't want to see this. You might think, oh, why would I want to see a prequel to Psycho? Trust me, it's really great. It really works extremely well. I love Psycho. I love all the Psycho movies, by the way. I love all the Psycho movies. And one day we're going to talk about some of that stuff, and it'll be an interesting conversation. But suffice to say, I'm a big fan of the franchise. I'm a big fan of the original movie. I thought this was a bad idea. I was way, 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 way wrong. It's absolutely fantastic. So please, if you're a Psycho fan, give it a chance, because it will surprise you how great it actually is. Okay, we're into the top 3 horror television shows of all time. Undisputed, not just my opinion. And number 3, we're going to go with The Twilight Zone. The Twilight Zone is one of the greatest horror television shows of all time. No hyperbole. You know, the horror movie syllabus, for those of you that follow it, you guys know that we explore modern horror, 1970 to the present. And I was kind of do the same with the horror television. In fact, for the most part, I did, except for this one, because this came out in the 1950s. And that's the thing, is I can't not include the Twilight Zone on this list, because ever since I was a little boy, I love this show. I watched this show as a child. I was not born in the 50s. I've watched it on repeats, because the show's been aired in repeats forever. In fact, when I was a kid, every holiday, every Memorial Day, Labor Day, anytime you were home for a Monday, they would have a marathon of the Twilight Zone, and I would watch it. I would watch like for hours, just watch episodes of the Twilight Zone. For those of you that aren't familiar with it, the show is an anthology show that was narrated every week by a guy named Rod Serling, who created the show. And it was different morality tales. It was different, like, ironic takes on stories. Some of them were like more science fiction or drama, but they were mostly rooted in horror. And they, like I said, they had like kind of an ironic twist to them. Every other anthology series you've seen like since then, like Creepshow or any of these other ones that have come out, basically owe a debt to Twilight Zone. Now, there were other shows out there kind of like this, Outer Limits, Night Stalker. There were other shows around the same era that were also very good. But Twilight Zone to me is the quintessential one. That is the gold standard, the cream of the crop. It's the one that everybody knows. It's the one that's the most famous. And to me, it's still by far the best anthology horror show ever. And it holds up. Like, yes, they're in black and white. Yes, they're dated, like some of the themes and stuff like that, some of the technology they're talking about, it's dated stuff. But it doesn't matter, because the stories, the lessons, the ironies hold today. For the most part, the Twilight Zone is still extremely effective. Now, they did a remake of it in the 80s. They did a remake of it recently with Jordan Peele. For whatever reason, they always pale in comparison to the original, even though the original is 60 some odd years old, 70 years old now. The original holds up. It just, there's something about the writing, there's something about the story, there's something about the heart that really, really works. They're just fun. And you can find these usually streaming somewhere. They're not hard to find, and just check one out. There's several great episodes. Look online for people's favorite episodes, top 10 episodes. One of my favorites is I think it's called Living Doll. It's the Talking Tina episode, one of my all-time favorites. But there's so many great ones. I could go make a whole video of just like the best the best Twilight Zone episode. Maybe I will make the best Twilight Zone episode list at some point in time. Not soon, don't worry. I'm effusive about this show. Again, there's a nostalgia aspect to me, because I grew up watching this show as a kid. But also there's just a deep appreciation for just how good this was, how boundary pushing it was at the time, and how relevant it feels today as a result of those boundary pushings back in the 50s. So, by all means, if you have not experienced Twilight Zone, check it out, because you might really dig it. You might be surprised that even though it's a show that's very old and it's black and white and dated, that it really does hold up. It really is great, and you can see what everybody's talking about, why people consider it to be such a legendary show. People like me. And hey, it's number 3 on the list, so why wouldn't you check it out? Number 3 show of all time. Twilight Zone, it's near and dear to my heart. I love it dearly, and I can't praise it enough. The number 2 show on our list, the second best horror television show of all time, is Buffy the Vampire Slayer. And if you are a frequent viewer of the horror movie syllabus, you are not at all surprised about Buffy the Vampire Slayer being on this list. You are probably only surprised that it's not in the number one spot, considering how much I talk about it. I'm a big fan of Buffy the Vampire Slayer, and I mention it way too much on the show, probably, but it's because it's an incredible show. It's got a silly title, and I think a lot of people were turned off by the silly title. They were probably turned off by the notion of it being a show about vampire hunting. And those people that didn't tune into it, who didn't give it a chance, missed out, because the show is so much more than that. You know, it's an allegorical show about growing up and dealing with adult themes and adult issues, told in a fantastical way of a story about a young girl who's the chosen one, destined to fight vampires, and her high school is literally on the gates of hell. So it's the metaphor of high school being hell and dealing with all those adolescent issues. And then as the show goes on, how she has to deal with more and more grown-up issues and very, very heavy subject matter. This show goes in places you wouldn't expect it to go, but the key to the show is the characters. The characters are really, really, really good, very, very well realized, fully fleshed out, and over the course of 7 incredible seasons, they grow in amazing ways, very realistic ways. You grow to identify with these characters, to love these characters, and when they go through the ringer, you go through it with them. There's a reason why the fan base of this show is so devoted to it even 25 years later, is because these characters feel like family to you. They matter to you. And so you connect with them on such a deep level that the show becomes more than just a show. You really, really start to feel it. And it holds up. And you'd think it's a show that started in the late 90s, that it would be very, very dated. And sure, some of the things are dated, but frankly, most of it holds up extremely well. I'm obsessed with watching reaction videos to Buffy the Vampire Slayer on YouTube. Younger people, Gen Z people, watching the show for the first time. And they all seem to think the show holds up extremely well. They don't seem put off by it seeming dated. But B, they feel it the same way that I felt it when I was watching it when it came out. They connect to it on the same level. It still has that same effect on people, even 25 years later. It still resonates. And it's because it's really good writing. Now, it's created by Joss Whedon, and Joss Whedon is persona non grata these days. I get that. Don't let Joss Whedon be the reason why you don't check this show out, because all the other people working the show, from the other writers to the actors, they all did incredible work that they should be incredibly proud of. Don't throw their work away because of one man. This work endures regardless of Joss Whedon. It's amazing because it's a continuation of a schlocky horror film that is talked about as an extra credit film in the horror movie syllabus. But the show took that schlocky premise and made so much more out of it, and mined it for such rich material, such rich characters, portrayed by Sarah Michelle Gellar and an amazing supporting cast. Everybody's good in the show. It's exceptional and could easily have been my number one, but you'll see why it's not in just a second. But I adore the show. I am not alone. There are legions of fans. The show endures, and if you haven't seen it, you absolutely should give it a chance. Fair warning, the first season, it's still finding its footing. It doesn't really hit its stride till season 2, but even season 1 is fun. Season 2 is where it really gets real, though. Excellent show, exceptional show, timeless show. I love it. You knew I was going to talk about it. I'm not going to talk about it forever because we'll be here all day. Just suffice to say, you should check out Buffy the Vampire Slayer. Before we get to number 1, I'll throw out a few honorable mentions, because that's what people do on these kinds of lists, and because I had a few extra shows that I couldn't squeeze onto this list of 10, so I figured I'd just throw them out here as honorable mentions. These are ones that just missed the list. The first one is The X-Files. The X-Files was a alien-themed horror show that was phenomenal in the 90s. Loved that show when it came out. It went on a little too long. They went back to the well a few too many times. That's kind of what pushed it off the list. But it's still fantastic. Next honorable mention is the show Dexter, which I've mentioned on the syllabus before. I love Dexter. Another show that they didn't stick the landing, and that hurts the show a little bit. But they're doing a reboot of that show. So if the reboot winds up redeeming it and making it good, that show might squeeze its way back on the list, because I absolutely love Dexter. Love the books too, by the way. Third honorable mention is Preacher. Preacher is a show that's based on a comic book about a preacher with supernatural powers who's looking for God. We won't go too into the plot points on that, but if you haven't seen that one, that's a wild ride of a show. Side note, I have a friend who worked on the show, and he gave me this hat from the production. I love that show. I love the comic book, and the show is a pretty good representation of a comic book that I didn't think could be ever filmed. And they did a really good job of turning it into a show. Didn't make the cut, but it's a great show nonetheless. If you haven't seen that show and you're into some gory, insane stuff, Preacher might be a good one for you. Next honorable mention I'll mention is True Blood, which is another show. It's a vampire show that didn't quite stick the landing either. Man, that show started out really, really strong. I'm a big Anna Paquin fan. I loved all the characters in the show. It petered out towards the end there. It went a little longer than it should have. Ran out of story. But when it was good, it was really, really good. It was a fresh take on vampires, and I really, really liked it when it came out. Like I said, it just went on a little too long. And the last honorable mention that I'll mention is Dark Shadows, which is a soap opera in the 1960s about a family, a wealthy family that lived in an old manor, and all kinds of spooky things that would go on there, including a vampire, an ancestor vampire that came back to life named Barnabas Collins. I absolutely love Dark Shadows. By today's standards, it's pretty campy and dated, and that's part of the charm. Fun side note, I found this show, as an adult and really kind of grew to love it. Did not know until later on that my mother used to watch it as a child, and it was one of her favorite shows. So we were able to bond over that. So, hi, Mom, if you're watching. But yeah, I have a soft spot in my heart for Dark Shadows. I absolutely love it. It's got its fandom. It's dated. It's cheesy. It's campy by today's standards, but I do love it. So I had to mention it here. And now for our number one show, number one horror television show, bar none, my opinion and everybody's opinion. Also one of the best TV shows of all time, Twin Peaks. And Twin Peaks is oftentimes called a horror show, but not always called a horror show because it's a complicated show. It's kind of its own thing. It's a David Lynch show, and if you know David Lynch, you know that David Lynch is kind of just does David Lynch type stuff. And we're going to talk about him more on the horror movie syllabus. But for now, Twin Peaks basically a soap opera about a murder mystery. A popular girl in school gets murdered, found dead, and the whole town is a suspect, and everybody's kind of quirky and strange, and a quirky and strange FBI agent comes in to investigate, and it's like nothing else you've ever seen. I'm going to tell you right now, you've never seen anything like Twin Peaks before. There were a lot of things that tried to imitate it later on, quirky things. None of them ever quite captured it. It's really one of a kind. It is both a soap opera and a parody of a soap opera at the same time, and if you understand that, it will help you enjoy the show more, because when you watch it, it's very strange. It's very melodramatic. Scenes go on a little too long. The music is really, it swells and just overtakes scenes. The actors are playing things really, really big. Weird things happen. And you have to be braced for that. It seems like it's a normal narrative, and then by episode 3, it gets really, really weird, and you're either in or you're out. I know I made my wife watch it, and episode 3, she tapped out. She was done. I'm like, done. She was like, nope, not doing this anymore. So it's not for everybody. It's an acquired taste. The quirkiness is very, very quirky. The strangeness is very, very strange. It's by and large not that scary of a show. It's more just a weird show. But when it gets scary, and there are a few episodes that get particularly scary, it gets really, really scary. David Lynch knows how to make a scary scene, and it gets really, really freaky. The show had 2 seasons on the air. The first season was only 7 episodes or 8 episodes long. Really fantastic. It was a nationwide phenomenon, worldwide phenomenon. The show was a huge hit. Season 2 started to run out of steam for a lot of reasons, which I won't get into here because this video is not about all that. But suffice to say, season 2, it wound up getting canceled after that until 25 years later when they finally made a season 3 for Showtime, which was about a year or so ago. And season 3 got really weird. If you thought season 1 and 2 was weird, season 3 got super weird. Season 3 was 18 episodes, and it's basically an 18-hour David Lynch movie. It's insane and surreal and bizarre and weird, and I love it. And people love it, people hate it. Very strong opinions either way on that one. But if you look at it as both a revival of a TV show and also a parody of revivals of TV shows, it might help you understand it a little bit more, and you might be able to go along with it a little bit easier. But the show is daring and bold and fresh and original and strange and beautiful and wonderful and scary. It is all kinds of things. It's so unique, so original, so very fulfilling and so very unfulfilling in the best possible ways. I could talk about it for hours, and we're pushing a long video as it is. So I'm going to go ahead and just stop it there and just say Twin Peaks may not be for everybody, but if you want to give it a chance, give it 3 episodes. And after that third episode, it gets really weird in that third episode. You'll know if you're in or out. And if you're in for the long haul. It's going to be a fantastic, wild ride. And if you're not into it, hey, I don't judge people. Man, it's not for everybody, but there's a reason why people are so devoted to it. I am one of those people. I probably will wind up doing another Twin Peaks video at some point in time, just because I want to. But as evidenced by the fact that it beat out Buffy the Vampire Slayer, you can see how much I love Twin Peaks, how great of a show it is. It changed television. It really did. It was the first show to become like appointment viewing, and VCRs had just been invented, so people would record it and parse it for clues and details. And it's changed the way we watch television for the better. The golden age of television owes a big, big debt of gratitude to Twin Peaks. Twin Peaks is what launches this this appointment television that you have to see, this long form storytelling, this character development, this high quality TV made by filmmakers and making it look like film. The quality being good. All of that comes from Twin Peaks. It's a watershed moment for television in general, horror television in particular. I love it. I'm wearing a Twin Peaks t-shirt. Anyways, Twin Peaks. It's the best. So thank you guys for indulging me while I talked a little bit about horror television. I know that it's not our normal format, and next week we'll be going back to our regularly scheduled programming. I just wanted to get an opportunity to talk about some of my favorite horror television shows, why I like them so much. A lot of them I wound up mentioning when we were talking about movies because a certain actor was in Buffy or in Twin Peaks or something like that, and so I'll mention the show. So I figured I'd do a little ranking video just to change it up a little bit, try a little bit of different content. Let me know what you thought about it. Let me know if you're just like, hey, stick to the syllabus. I'm not interested in seeing this other stuff. Let me know. I'm not gonna be mad about it. I just appreciate the feedback. If you like this, if you want to see some other kinds of videos, whether ranking videos or just me exploring other things besides horror films, or maybe other horror adjacent type things. One of the things I've talked about doing is like a horror soundtrack review. So let me know if you like some of those ideas. If you think there's some other things to explore that you'd be interested in seeing. If you have specific ideas, let me know what those are too. I can't promise we'll get to them, but I'm looking for ways to expand the channel, because in another year or so we're going to be finished with the syllabus, and we'll have to figure out what we're going to do next, because I want to keep hanging out with you guys. So your input is appreciated. I would definitely like to know what you guys think of other ideas, other formats, things to do, while interspersing syllabus-related content at the same time. So let me know what you guys think. I appreciate you guys. And again, thanks for indulging me. And until next week when we get back to our regular class, we'll just say for this time, class dismissed.